Cormann.
Well,
anyway.
okay, I'll go to Senator Ludlam.
Yeah, mine. This will be reasonably quick. Senator Cormann, I'm just checking. Firstly, piece of correspondence that I put to you on January 30 of this year, relating to Mangles Bay Marine Project in Cape Peron in WA. Is that familiar to you?
Yeah, I'm aware of the issue in general terms, but I obviously haven't got a copy of the letter in front of me. This is in relation to some Commonwealth land that was sold like many decades ago.
Yeah, in the 60s.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get confirmation, but you might have to pass this back to your office and take it on notice as to whether I've received a reply. I sent one to Minister Hunt in similar form on the same day. I've got a reply from him that I'm going to put to you in a moment.
You're saying you have not received a reply from me?
I don't believe I have, but I just figured as a courtesy I'd ask you rather than telling you.
I'll check. I've certainly seen something go past my desk, so
could you just do that? Well, I know if that can just go
I certainly remember some advice. Yep, I'll check that.
All right. If you're aware with the general scope of the issue, though, and I'm happy if either you or the officers at the table can take this question. Have had, as I say, correspondence back from Minister Hunt that actually acknowledge not just the environmental values but also the social and economic values of the area as it is at the moment, and acknowledge the issues that were raised when the property was, or the precinct I should say, was transferred in 1964 from the Commonwealth to Western Australia. And you'll be aware that there were conditions at the time which I suppose we're arguing over whether, the degree to which they're legally binding or not.
Just to assist you, my recollection is that the advice that I received was that there's no ongoing interest from the Commonwealth in the property concerned, and that what is done in a development sense by a local authority, be that at a state or local government level, subject to compliance with all of the relevant legislation, environmental planning or otherwise, is really a matter for the local authorities.
Including, you'd acknowledge, Commonwealth obligations as
well, as I said, any legal obligations, obviously, whether they are federal environmental legal requirements or whatever they might be. But the Commonwealth does not retain an ongoing property interest. So, I mean, our interest as a government, and that goes beyond the finance portfolio, I would say, is obviously to make sure, as we would make sure anywhere across Australia, that any development happens in accordance with the law.
Minister, as a Western Australian senator, has this issue been raised with you by constituents? Has any correspondence come through your office about the values of that area? Well,
I've been aware, believe it or not, for a 10-year period of the strong desire by the local community in Rockingham to develop a marina in that area. But I mean, I've got to say, like your letter and the advice in that context was the first time that I had been made aware that there was any link with the Commonwealth whatsoever. So, my awareness of the issues around that project in the past have not been in my capacity as a Minister for Finance. They've exclusively been in my capacity as a Senator for the great state of Western Australia.
In which, I think, just to be clear, you've just acknowledged that people have raised concerns about potential damage to the values.
Well, so some people have. The people that have raised concerns with me are those that have been concerned that the development of the area has been delayed.
People are demanding that have a marina.
People that have raised concerns with me have been very keen to see the development accelerate, essentially for a period of more than 10 years that I've personally been involved in. People in the local community in Rockingham have been very keen to see that area develop. But again, I mean, I think that we're well and truly going beyond my areas of responsibility.
No, I understand that.
As the Minister for Finance.
But can we just ensure that we're talking about the same place? Because there's one proposal for a jetty up in Rockingham, which I think is not only uncontroversial but supported by everybody I've come across. What I'm referring to and what the correspondence I put to you refers to is the conditional approval that the West Australian Office of the EPA has given to a Mangles Bay Marina project, actually on Point Peron itself. That's what impacts on Commonwealth environmental values. Yeah,
sure. But I mean, anything that relates to Commonwealth environmental legislation is obviously outside the scope of the estimates here. in response to what I understand to be your inquiry to me, in my capacity as the Minister for Finance, and I think and the department obviously might want to add to this, my understanding is that the Commonwealth does not retain a property interest in relation to that particular area that you're referring to. So any interest that the Commonwealth would have in relation to this area is obviously compliance with any relevant federal legislation when it comes to the development of that particular area.
Well, I wouldn't want to concede that, which is why it's a shame that you haven't replied in writing to my question to you.
Well, let's just get to the bottom of that. I believe I have, yeah.
Okay, that's fine. Oh, you believe you have?
I believe
All right,
I have,
we'll
yeah.
leave that as an open question just in case you have. As you'd probably be aware then, if you've seen at least a piece of draft correspondence, you'd be aware that when the property was originally transferred, this is 10 January 1964, that
So 50 years ago.
Yes, 64.
Yeah,
Indeed.
so 50 years ago, yeah.
That's right. But we sign treaties and other legal instruments that are still in effect. The Constitution's older than 50 years. We still pay that the respect that it deserves as a legal instrument. So I hope you're not saying, Senator Cormann, that some magical passage of time renders the law of the land irrelevant.
No, but if there's a transfer of property, obviously there is a transfer of property. And there was a transfer of property, as I understand it, 50 years ago.
Yeah. It came with the condition that it would be subject to the future use of the area being restricted to a reserve for recreation and or parklands. Is that a familiar phrase to you?
Well, why don't we ask the department to go into the details of all of that?
Great.
Senator John Owens, First Assistant Secretary, Property and Construction Division. I don't have the actual agreement in front of me, but my recollection was that it was a verbal agreement between the Prime Minister at the time, Sir Robert Menzies, and the Premier of Western Australia.
It was a written agreement.
So our
sorry, just to correct you there, I'm quoting from a written agreement.
Oh, it's written, but the advice we have is that it has no force in law. It didn't amount to a covenant on the use of the land, and it is not. We've looked into this, and some 14 years ago we advised the State of Western Australia that the Commonwealth has no continuing binding legal rights in relation to the use of the land at issue. So, regardless of the status of the agreement between Sir Robert Menzies and the Premier of Western Australia at the time, it doesn't amount to a continuing legal claim or right or control over the land in question.
Why on earth not? So what should people at the time, or people now actually, read into a condition that said subject to the future use of the area, this is the transfer, being subject to the future use of the area being restricted to a reserve for recreation and or parklands?
Well, as I say, it's a written agreement between the Premier and the Prime Minister, but that in itself does not relate to a legally binding covenant over the use of the land into the future, and that's the legal advice we have. Two parties can say things, but that in itself does not amount, in this case, to a legally binding claim over the land or legal right over the land.
Senator Ludlam, I'm just going to interrupt here.
Yeah, sure.
We are on outcome 2.2, which specifically the Minister responsible, Senator Ronaldson, who is now present. So I'm going to excuse Senator Cormann, unless you have a final question for him.
Well, I've been discussing correspondence between our two officers.
Yes,
so
I understand, but this
I haven't
is
written to
outcome.
Senator Ronaldson.
Well, I've undertaken to get to the bottom of where the correspondence is at. I'm certainly aware of the broader issue. It might well be that because technically this is an area of responsibility for Senator Ronaldson and not in my part of the portfolio. The reason I have had an interest in it is because I'm broadly aware of the issues, but it might be that Senator Ronaldson is actually dealing with these matters.
Could you just clarify for me? I put this to you. It's helpful that you're a senator from the same state as I am, but I put this to you in your capacity as Minister for Finance.
Yeah.
Are you saying it's actually
well,
not your responsibility?
in the finance portfolio, we've obviously got a sharing of responsibilities. We've got the Special Minister of State and also the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister for Finance, who have responsibilities in the property-related space. So it might well be that the correspondence was transferred to either of them, and that my awareness is because I've seen some briefing notes go past my desk. But as I've said, I've undertaken to get to the bottom of it and to make sure that you get a reply to your inquiry. But I think we've answered substantially your queries here today anyway.
No, I'm left profoundly unanswered.
Well, you might disagree, but the proposition essentially is that in relation to land that was transferred in 1964, the Commonwealth does not retain ongoing rights.
Well,
just Senator Ludlam,
Yeah.
this is the portfolio responsibility of Senator Ronaldson. Senator Cormann, we've asked Senator Ronaldson to come down here early to facilitate this, so I'm excusing Senator Cormann.
all right, bring him forward.
And
That's fine.
I would invite Senator Ronaldson.
Let's see if he has the faintest idea what I'm talking about.
Well, Senator Ludlam, this is his portfolio
But
responsibility.
you're exchanging someone who
Thank-
does have some expertise
Yeah.
with someone who doesn't.
Senator
Well, we'll
Ludlam-
see. We'll give him a chance.
Yeah, Senator Ludlam, you can put your questions. You can put your
No, you
questions
were.
on
That's
notice.
why I was rather hoping you could stick around. So let's see.
I welcome the Special Minister of State, Senator the Honourable Michael Ronaldson. We are on outcome 2.2, and I will now go to Senator Collins.
Okay. I'm happy if Senator Ludlam wants to finish his stream of questions.
No, you can rethink them.